it's Sarah here from BJC Health, coming to you from Sydney, Australia. Thanks for showing an interest in one of our educational events. You're about to watch part one, so enjoy the event. If you've got any questions about the content, then please consider joining BJC Connect, where you can access all of our facilitators live. Otherwise, please consider leaving a comment and we'll do our best to get back to you.
I would like your questions tonight. Gut microbiome always brings up quite a lot of questions, and if there are some technical questions that I need to take away tonight and formulate a more technical response, then please just put them in the chat group too, because Sarah will forward those on to me and we'll make sure we get some good answers to you. But basically, I'd like it to be a little bit practical and show you some of the foods and some of the, I guess, countdown in terms of the top 5 things that help to fill your gut with good gut microbiome. And I think a lot of people have heard these terminologies before, but what really is gut microbiome? Why is it beneficial? And what can I eat to help me make more of the good stuff and avoid making less of the bad gut bacteria? So we have about 40 trillion bacteria in our body, and actually most of it is found in your gut. It's a big number, there's a lot of different types of bacteria, and collectively we call this bacteria microbiome. And of course, the bacteria that's in your gut collectively is called gut microbiome. And everybody has a unique set. It's like your DNA really, or like your fingerprint. Everybody has a unique network of microbiota, and it does have something to do with your DNA or kind of what you're born with. And it's also what you were exposed to when you were born. So if you were born via natural childbirth, you actually pick up a lot of the microbe bacteria that are in your mother's system as you move through the birth canal. And they do say it's quite important. It's one of the reasons why natural childbirth is encouraged. I myself had 3 cesareans, and that was so that my babies came out safely because I couldn't have a natural birth. And part of me was thinking back then when they were born, they're going to miss out on that very initial stage of where you pick up all of this really good gut microbiome as you come through the birth canal. So you're born with exposure to whatever your mother's microbiome is like, as well as breast milk. And of course, nowadays they're trying to make formula as close to breast milk as they can, but of course they can't. They can put probiotics in it, but they can't actually put some of the natural microbiome that comes from breast milk. So you start with your DNA and you start with this exposure when you were born. And then as time goes along, environmental factors and diet, illnesses, antibiotics, all sorts of things can then impact your gut microbiome, and it can change as we age. And the thing with gut microbiome is they're starting to realize that potentially a lot of chronic disease might also stem from this disimbalance that we might get somewhere along the lines within our gut microbiome. So things like mental health conditions, anxiety, depression, potentially things like diabetes, even inflammatory disease, inflammatory bowel disease, or even inflammatory arthritis, that's still early days. But it's a watch this space, because a lot of researchers are saying that if we can have a much better gut microbiome through our childhood, our teenage and our early 20s, if we can protect that, we might be able to decrease the risk of some of the diseases that we then struggle with in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. So one of the main things that your gut microbiome does is that it stimulates your immune system. So it can make it easier for you to fight toxic parasites, bacteria, etc. It can help reduce inflammation. It can help you potentially deal with food toxins when they break down in your body and you digest them. Some of your gut microbiome is actually very important in helping you synthesize vitamins and amino acids or proteins in your body. So it's very beneficial to have good gut microbiome. Now, some of the mechanism of what happens with making gut flora is that when we eat things like complex carbohydrates, starches and fibers that we don't digest very easily, they actually go into your large intestine and they help feed the bacteria that you have in your large intestine, and they ferment. And when they ferment, they make something that we call short chain fatty acids, SCFAs. And these short chain fatty acids, say that fast 3 times, can be used by your body as nutrients, as a nutrient source. They have a role in muscle function and helping you stay strong. They possibly reduce the risk of chronic disease, and they can be used in the treatment of inflammatory bowel disease. So we want people to make lots of short chain fatty acids if they have inflammatory bowel disease, and I think there are supplements that can help people do this depending on what's happening with their gut microbiome. These days, it's a lot easier to actually test your gut microbiome. And actually, I probably should have, and I can do this, send it to Sarah. There are a couple of companies now that are in Australia, or more in Australia, where you send them a stool sample and they will send you a little booklet. It's a very comprehensive report on what is happening with your gut microbiota, some of the different names, and whether you have higher than average or the amount that they desire, whether you have more of the good ones or how much of the bad ones. And it has historically, it hasn't been around for very long, but it is quite expensive. But I'm just now starting to see that there are clients having this test done because they're very keen to see what their gut microbiome is like. And of course, if they're about to undertake an anti-inflammatory diet or a Mediterranean style diet that we talk about at BJC, a lot of my clients will then plan to have another test 12 months later to see whether their gut microbiome improves. Now, don't feel you have to go and have this test done. The theory is the same. So what I'm going to talk to you about today very practically, and I've got a few products here to show you, the set of recommendations that help you to make better gut flora are the same regardless of what health conditions you have, or even if you're healthy, we still want to do these things. They're safe things to do. It's natural. They actually, most of these recommendations, you would have heard me talk about a lot of them before, because they also help you with managing cholesterol, blood pressure, preventing diabetes, or looking after your blood sugar levels if you do have diabetes. They can help with anti-inflammation if you have arthritis. It can help with weight management as well. So some of this won't be so new to you. It will be more about linking it to another reason why it's recommended that we try to include these types of food in our diet. And that is that if we can really affect our gut, if we can impact positively on our gut, it may actually assist you with managing other conditions that you have. So the types of things that we're trying to increase, and I was just saying to Sarah before we came on that I find it very hard to pronounce these gut microbiome names, so just bear with me a little bit. But we particularly want to look after having more bifidobacterium in your gut. We want to have more lactobacillus in your gut, and we want to have more clostridium in your gut. And food can actually help impact on whether or not you can flourish this good gut bacteria. So let's have a look at some of the practical ways that we can help this to happen. So what we're trying to do is improve those bacteria in your gut. And remember, we also want to impact the gut by helping it make more short-chain fatty acids, which improves your immune system. So one of the #1 recommendations, no matter who you read or what you read, whether they're articles or they're people like Michael Mosley, and I do have Michael Mosley's The Clever Guts Diet here, and he actually has a matching cookbook to go with this little, I guess, theory book, if you like. So it doesn't matter who you talk to, but Michael Mosley is somebody who is very into gut microbiome, and he's done a lot of his TV series on this subject. One of the first things to do is to eat a diverse range of foods. And I know that sounds super simple, but a lot of clients, when they come to see me, if we're going to talk practically, and I say to them, what are your favorite vegetables? And they might say, oh, well, I'll eat a bit of broccoli, bit of green beans, bit of zucchini, bit of carrot. That's probably about it. They're my favorites. And that's great. It's always good to have your favorites. But diversity means that we want to be trying to eat up to 40 different types of fruits, vegetables, and nuts and seeds, for example, across the week. Obviously not every day, because that's almost impossible. But if you don't eat cabbages and Brussels sprouts and cauliflower and kimchi and bok choy and all these other different vegetables, this is the kind of session where you think, I'm going to try and get inspired after listening tonight, and I'm going to try and either find recipes using vegetable and salad ingredients that I don't usually use, because diversity is the key. You want to eat the rainbow, so we want as many different colors as possible, and we want to have as many different types of fruits and vegetables. And one of the reasons we also want to do that is because the more diverse you are, especially with your natural foods, the more likely you won't have as much room for the foods that can make it harder for your gut to function properly. And we'll talk a little bit about those in a moment. But of course, one of those things is sugar. So if we're eating fruit, natural fruit, and diversifying those fruits, and we're eating lots of vegetables and we feel full and satisfied, we're usually less likely to crave sugar and the types of foods that then destroy the good gut microbiome and make your gut more permeable. This is that, if you've heard of the term leaky gut, the types of foods that can contribute to this condition called leaky gut, which is not so good for your immune system, and it increases the inflammation in your body. So coming off diversity, eat lots of vegetables, legumes, beans, and fruit. The reason for these is that the foods are high in fiber, and they can actually help with this fermentation in your gut. It provides good food for your gut microbiome to flourish, and so then you're more likely to actually make more good bacteria. And some of the really popular ones, I mean, I've got a bit of a list here. So when I read quite a few things leading up to this session, the same types of food lists kept coming up. So we have things like raspberries, artichoke, green peas, things like broccoli, asparagus, green beans, all my favorites. Of course, if anyone's heard me speak before, everyone is going to know I'm going to bring things like chickpeas, lentils. I'll talk a little bit more about some of these that are also what we call prebiotic foods, and prebiotic foods are really good to make gut flora. There's some red lentils. These are wonderful in all your winter soups. They just fall apart. You blend them in and no one will even know that they're there. but a really good way to increase lentils in your diet, especially over this time of the year. We want to eat whole grains when you have carbohydrates, and also things like apples. Apples are actually really good for gut microbiome. So particularly apples, artichokes, and I'm sorry I didn't get to a Harris farm today. I was going to try to. I don't know how many of you are familiar with cooking artichokes. Artichokes, blueberries, almonds. I've got some almonds here. Some of these particularly increase that bifidobacteria that is really good for your immune system. And so we really want to look at these types of foods because they are linked to reducing the inflammation, not just in your gut, but then in your whole body. Now, I saw Sarah's face when I mentioned artichoke. Now, for whatever reason, my husband loves artichoke and he will cook them every so often. And they're actually quite simple. He just steams them, and then you pluck the leaves off. They become very tender, and you actually literally just suck the artichoke flesh off the skin. And then when you get to the middle, you get the artichoke heart, which of course I love marinated artichokes, Italian style marinated artichokes that you put on beautiful cheese boards. But if you do this fresh, you can actually just peel the flesh off an artichoke leaf, and then you just pick the next one and you do that. It's actually really quite nice. If you haven't tried it, Google very simply, how do I cook an artichoke? And you'll get a very simple breakdown of how to do it. And I really encourage you to try it. Don't eat too much at once, and this is something we'll talk about in a moment, but a lot of these foods can really impact your gut in terms of bloating and promoting some excessive wind. So with some of these foods, we need to go slow and actually put them in bit by bit so that your gut actually gets used to eating them. So think that if some of these foods are going to ferment in your gut and it provides good food for your flora to feed off, that fermentation creates wind. And so we need to go a little easy. And so one of the other things you can do with gut microbiome is actually eat fermented foods. So most people are familiar with things like, yogurt, or even having some kefir, which is fermented yogurt. So it's a probiotic yogurt, but you normally get it in like a drink. But you can also do things like kimchi. So I bought some kimchi. This is it's a jarred one. So it basically has in it, it's a very traditional Korean type food. It has cabbage, carrot, white radish, and then just some gherkins. And then it's garlic, onion, pepper, water, and then salt. It says sugar, but there's actually not much sugar in this. The thing you need to be careful about with fermented foods, and of course, my parents are Eastern European, so I've eaten quite a bit of sauerkraut in my life, which is just cabbage, fermented cabbage. With some of these products, you need to be a little bit careful with the salt. And so it's good to drain the fluid off. But basically, part of the fermentation process is the soaking of these vegetables in salt and water. But they're really tasty, very delicious, and really, really good for your gut flora. So yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, even kombucha. I have quite a few clients that ask me about, is it okay to drink kombucha? And if it's a kombucha that doesn't have added sugar in it, then yes, it can be a great different thing to drink than just water. And tempeh is like it's fermented, not quite like tofu, but it's white like tofu, and it's quite salty. So of course you have to be careful with that too. It's quite a strange food, and it takes people a little bit of time to get used to it. And you might only have it once every month, for example, but that's another way to get a fermented food. Now, a lot of these foods will help you with your lactobacilli bacteria, which is also really good for your intestines and helping with inflammation and trying to manage chronic disease. So if you can get a few more of these types of foods in your diet, then that's also really helpful. But I know for a lot of people, they're quite new, where it might take a little bit of time to experiment with that. So prebiotic foods. So we have fermented foods. We have foods, vegetables, legumes, and just your regular types of things that you would think of for salads and vegetables. But prebiotic foods are different again. So they include the onion and the garlic, bananas, lentils, legumes, something we call inulin, I-N-U-L-I-N. Inulin is a natural type of fiber, but they've started putting inulin into places like yogurt. Yogurt doesn't have any fiber in it. So a little while ago, it was suggested that inulin would be added to yogurt to give it fiber. And for those of you that have irritable bowel, and I will mention this in regards to FODMAPs, because some of you might be thinking, I can't eat all of these foods. That's okay. But these foods all feed your gut microbiome, and they help you if you're taking a probiotic. So I often have clients say to me, is it useful to take a probiotic? Now, probiotics don't work very well if they do not have prebiotic foods to feed off. So we want your intestines, we want your guts basically to be exposed to onion, garlic, artichokes is one of the big ones, asparagus, lentils, legumes, inulin, banana. These are some of your best sources of prebiotic foods. So they don't all break down very easily, so they find their way all the way to your large intestine, where they can ferment and help to feed your gut microbiome. Some of these also will contribute to something we call resistant starch in your diet. And resistant starch is another type of carbohydrate that I can explain in a moment, but I'll just get through this list. So the other thing is to eat whole grains. So when you eat carbohydrates, we want them to either be brown, so here's some brown rice, or something like barley. We have buckwheat, quinoa. Now, a lot of people ask me, what about gluten? Now, with a lot of people, gluten can be a problem for their gut. There is some evidence to suggest that gluten can create or contribute to this idea of leaky gut or permeability, thinness, holes in your gut, where then toxins can get released out of your intestines, which can create inflammation in the body. Now, for a long time, the idea of leaky gut was not really accepted by doctors and specialists, and to a certain extent, doctors and specialists don't talk about leaky gut. Dietitians talk about it a little bit, and then naturopaths talk about it a lot. Integrated GPs talk about it a lot, about whether there needs to be some healing of the gut to be able to have it function better, to keep the toxins within the walls, to decrease the inflammation around the rest of your body. So if you have a gluten intolerance or you are sensitive to gluten, we would always, well, myself personally, I can't talk for every dietitian, we take that into account, but we want you to eat good quality gluten-free grains. I still don't want people to eat white gluten-free pasta or white rice or white gluten-free bread, because we know that these foods are not helpful for gut microbiome They also are not helpful for cholesterol lowering, weight management, and blood sugar control. So if you need to be gluten-free, please consider multigrain gluten-free bread. Please consider things like this, pulse pastas that are gluten-free, but they're higher in protein and they're higher in fiber. So much better for blood sugar control, much better for gut microbiome. Consider using things like buckwheat and quinoa. And that way, you're able to do both. You're able to avoid gluten if that's a problem for you, but you're able to still get a little bit more of that fiber and a bit more complex carbohydrate, which is good for the gut. Try and eat as many plant foods as you can and be mindful of animal protein. So we normally say a serve of animal protein is the size of your palm. It's somewhere from 85 grams to about 120 grams cooked per serving. And we want that to be a smaller size so that it encourages you to eat lots of vegetables with it to fill you up. Because the vegetables with the antioxidant load is going to also help you with managing the byproducts that often happen when we digest animal protein. And it's better for your gut microbiome. Okay, couple more things. We like to eat foods that are high in polyphenols. This is things like dark chocolate, maybe a little bit of red wine if you already drink red wine, grapes, red grape skin, green tea is high in polyphenols, almonds is high in polyphenols, onions, blueberries, broccoli are very high. And these polyphenols can also help to increase the bifidobacteria and the lactobacilli in your gut, which of course is the bacteria that we're trying to increase to then help you with your immune system. We also know that polyphenols can be helpful for reducing inflammatory markers, and we know that it can help with cholesterol lowering and even potentially managing blood pressure. So it's one of those things that can help all round health. And then there's that idea of whether to take probiotics or not. And there's a little bit of controversy, I guess, or research that says, yes, taking probiotics is helpful, and other research will say taking probiotics is not so helpful. I think it totally depends on what is happening with you as an individual. I've read some research that states that if you are getting older, I want to say that in a nice way, I'm getting older, that the gut might not function as well as it did. And so some probiotics might help with that.
So you've just finished watching part 1 of one of our recent educational events. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you'd like to access part 2, then you need to sign up for BJC Connect. It's a free platform where you can access not just the recordings of past events, but also access a whole range of upcoming future events and access our team of facilitators live. All of the details that you need to join BJC Connect are now flashing up on your screen. But otherwise, like our staff, subscribe if you'd like to see more information from BJC Health. Look forward to seeing you in an event soon.